Hi everyone, welcome to my Valentine's Day video. The other day I was digging through my cutters and found a bunch of different sized hearts and thought, let's make some fun designs on these. So let's get right into it. Okay, so for my first cookie, I want to make it look like a box of chocolates, one of those cute little heart-shaped boxes you get for Valentine's Day. So starting with our outline consistency here, I'm going to outline my cookie. Outline consistency means it's just a thicker icing. It's holding its shape. So you can see when I'm piping a line, the line stays as is. It's not, seeping and flooding itself into a big puddle. This holds our flood icing in so that it doesn't go over the edge of the cookie. Now we're going to let this dry for a couple minutes and come back, and now I'm going to go ahead and flood it. So I'm flooding as close to the line as possible, and as I push the flood out, it's almost covering my line just a little bit. I like to try and hide my outline as much as possible, but if you're having troubles or issues with it, don't worry about it right away. Don't stress about it. These are things that come with practice. So if you're still new, just go slow, take your time, and do your best. Once you get inside the cookie, you can go a little bit faster, be a little bit more sloppy, but really take your time on the outside of the cookie to make sure that your icing stays where it should be, on the cookie, not over the edge. So I've let my cookie dry in the dehydrator. You can let it dry in the fan if you don't have one, or you have to let it air dry. It'll take a while. We're talking hours here. So if you have a fan, it really speeds up the process. Once it's crusted over, so it's not fully dry, but dry enough for me to pipe my next layer, I'm going to pipe lines like a big cross on it. And I'm just going to pipe the outline right now in my outline consistency. So again, I'm just outlining the ribbon part of the box of chocolates here that we have. And then I'm going to go back, once it's dry for a couple minutes, and flood the inside. So just before I flood, I'm going to add another line inside those lines of my outline consistency. The reason being, when you have small areas like this, they tend to crater. Crater means that the icing sort of divots in on itself, it falls in on itself, and it doesn't look so nice. So this just adds a little bit of extra support. And then I can just go right on top of it and flood in. These are smaller sections, so just do it carefully. Don't squeeze the bag too hard or you might end up with too much icing coming out. Make sure your hole is not too big either, because again, you won't have so much control over your bag. You can go in with your scribe if there's a few spots that you missed, it might not have gone right to the outline, then use your scribe to fix those areas and smooth everything out. And while the icing is still wet, I'm going to go in with my pink flood icing and just very, very gently squeeze the bag and put some dots on there. When I go in right away when the icing is still wet and I do these little dots, the dots will sink into the white icing and make one layer. Instead of those pink dots being on top of the white layer, they're actually going to sink inside. So then it looks like it's all one layer. Once I'm done this, I'm going to set this aside to dry again. We want to make sure it's dry enough that it's crusted over, and I can come back now and do the bow part. So here I'm just making 2 rounded triangles. My outline is not the best here because there's a lot of bumpy areas. It's not flat and even. So I'm going to outline this and then flood right away after. Reason I don't let this outline dry is because my outline isn't that great. It's, like I said, it's bumpy, so it's not really straight. And here I'm just adding a little bit outline to the middle there just to give it some support so it won't crater, and then go in right away with my flood. When you don't let the outline dry, you have a little give to move the shape around how you want it to. And so that's why I didn't want to let it dry because, well, I didn't do a very good job because it's so bumpy, it's hard to get straight lines. So then I can go and fix it with my scribe and make it a little bit nicer and more even. And then again, I'm going to go in right away with my pink flood. I have a really small hole, barely any pressure, just a dab of icing coming out. And I'll do it right away so that it sinks into that white icing. Once this part is ready, I'm going to set it aside again to dry. You always want to dry it in between these steps so that these shapes stay like that. If you start icing things beside each other, like if I'm doing the bottom of the ribbon right now before the top dried, it would all just melt together. So to make sure that they keep their shape, that's why we dry it in between steps. So again, it's really bumpy here. I'm trying my best. Doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm just going in and I'm actually just using my outline for this. It's still thick, but they're very small spots. So I'm just going to go in with my scribe and smooth it out as best as possible. Sometimes when it's a small area and your flood is a little bit too loose, you risk, going over the edge of the outline. So here it's tiny. I'm just going to go in with my outline and smooth it out. And then again, of course, I'm going to add my little pink dots here and let this dry. And once we dry, we're going to come back and do the outline just to give that bow a little bit more definition. And so I can do the top part of the bow now because it's dried enough. And so what I'm just doing a little teardrop shape on the top of the bow and then connecting around the outline. So again, a little teardrop shape, that's the sort of inside of the bow they're showing. And then you just outline the rest of the bow. I find this the easiest way to make bows look good. They're quite hard to make, if you're trying some other way. And then we're just going to add a dot for the center. Just put a little bit of pressure of icing in the middle there and smooth it out with your scribe. And now that the bottom ribbon is dry, I'm just going to go ahead and just outline it. And again, try your best. It doesn't have to be perfect. These are small areas. I'm using my left hand to help my right hand hold the bag there. I'm using my left finger against the bag to keep my hand really steady because it's really hard to get those small areas with one hand. Okay, moving on to cookie number 2. So this cutter came from a Wilton box of 101 cutters, and it's been great. I started out with that box. I got a coupon from Michael's, I think, and it was pretty cheap, maybe $15, $20 or something. And you get 100 cutters, and it covers most of the major holidays, Christmas, Valentine's Day, Easter, Halloween, and some basic shapes. So if you guys need, a bunch of cutters and you're not sure, these are some great cutters that you can get for cheap. And this is where this one came from. So I always outline my cookies. I like to do it with 2 consistencies. Again, I've done my outline and my stiffer consistency, and I'm going ahead and just flooding it with my flood icing. If you guys need any tips on consistencies or tipless bags, that's what I'm using here. You see that there's no metal tip. You guys can check out my channel. I've got a lot more videos on how I do my icing, what consistency it is, and things like that to help you guys out. So now that this is crusted over, I set it aside to dry for a little while. I can go ahead and do my black outline details. So again, this is just outline consistency. You can see when I'm piping it, it's holding its shape. It's not puddling anywhere. It's keeping that straight line. I'm going really slow. I'm not putting too much pressure on the bag when I touch down at first, and lift it up slightly. There's smaller areas, so you don't want to lift it up really big because when you come back down, you'll be way over where you're supposed to stop. And so we're just making the edge of the arrow, and we're just going to add a little semicircle there to make it look like it's going into the heart. And then on the other side, I'm just going to pipe a straight line, and I'm going to stop just at the heart there. And I'm going really slow. You can tell I'm taking my time. It's a small area. And then I'm going to do the top of the arrow. Now, when I look at this cookie, I'm not actually too happy with how that arrow came out. It looks a little too small for that area. Too much cookie for my liking is showing. So I'm just going to scrape it off. So it does leave a mark on the cookie, but it's fine. We'll be covering it up. But just so you know what? I make mistakes too. You can easily just scrape it off while it's still wet and go right over it. So I'm going to decide to actually fill in the arrow. Now, because I only have outline consistency, I'm going to go ahead and fill it in with that consistency, and I'm going to make it nice and full inside there, and it'll be easier to smooth it out if I have enough icing in there. If it's a really thin layer, I won't be able to get it really smooth. But for this small little part, I don't want to make a whole bag of separate flat icing, so I'll go ahead and use my outline. You can tell it's taking me a few seconds to smooth it out more than normal, but I'm wiggling it as best as I can and to get it as smooth as I can. But it works pretty good. And that's all we have for that cookie. So we'll move on to the third and last cookie here. So with this cookie, I thought we'd do something a little bit different and show some dimension. So here, just on the side of the heart, I'm going to put my thicker icing down. You can use your flood, doesn't really matter at this point. And I'm just using a regular paintbrush. This is a brush I only use for my cookies. And I want to paint on the color. So it's just a thin layer. It's not a thick layer of icing, just enough to color the cookie or, cover the cookie so only red will be showing. We're going to let this dry just for a couple minutes. It's thick icing and it's a really thin layer. It'll dry in no time. Just enough so that we could pipe over it without smudging our colors together. So now that it's dry with my white outline icing, I'm very carefully going to pipe a small heart over that red spot. I'm not the best at freehand, so I'm taking my time here, trying to go slow, touching down my icing when I want it to connect with the cookie and then lifting it up so that it falls nice and smooth, but it's staying close to the cookie because it is a smaller area. The closer I stay to the cookie, the more control I have in those smaller areas. When you have a bigger outline to do, like you can see on this part of the heart where I'm going around the curve and the next point is at the bottom of the heart I need to touch down, I can lift my piping bag up a little bit more. And then whenever I come to a point, I want to touch my bag down again. And if you're more comfortable, sometimes I like to start up from the top and work my way down, or you can just keep going around the cookie. There's really no wrong way to outline or flat. If you want to stop, the points or the change in directions are the best time to stop. But really, do what's comfortable for you. So once this outline dries after a couple minutes, I'm going to go in and flood the cookie. But first, in these narrower parts, I'm going to just put a squiggle of my outline consistency. Again, these smaller sections tend to crater, so to prevent that, I'm going to put a little bit of thicker icing underneath it to help keep it nice and puffy. So just carefully going to go over that edge there and just fill her in around the heart. And then I'll continue around the rest of the heart as normal. So again, I'm trying to go as close to the outline. I'm almost bubbling my icing over my outline to cover it. So now I'm just going to go with my scrap again just to smooth it out, and I'm trying to work a little bit fast here. And so I'm going to shake it to get it nice and smooth, because I want to do another wet on wet technique here. So again, just like the polka dots we did on the bow, we're going to do this right away while the white is still wet. And I'm slowly going to put diagonal lines in my pink. This is my outline consistency because my flood consistency bag was a little bit too big of a hole and I wanted really thin lines. So that's why I'm using my outline bag, and because the lines stay a little bit straighter. Sometimes your flood, if it's too loose and you're doing a wet on wet, sometimes it doesn't give you those straight lines. Here my icing broke because there's a little bubble in the bag, but you just continue on, make the best of it. I just connected my line as best as I could. And so when you start these lines, when you touch down on the edge, I'm not putting my tip right into the icing. I'm squeezing out a little bit of icing out of my bag. And then I'm touching that icing down to the white. So again, I squeeze a little bit of pink icing out of my bag, and then I touch that icing to the white icing. I'm not touching the actual tip of my bag into the white icing, or I'm trying not to. So over the next minute or so, this pink icing is going to melt into the white icing. So I'm just going to give it a little shake to help it along here, to let it fall in. I'm going to try to fix that one area that broke here, but I don't want to touch it too much. And so this makes it look like one layer of icing instead of having a diagonal line sitting on top of your white icing. And there you have it, 3 cute Valentine's Day heart cookies. You can really use any shape to make these ones, and I showed you a couple different techniques to make them a little bit more interesting than your regular cookies, so I hope you give them a try. Thank you so much for watching, and looking forward to sharing a lot more videos with you guys in the future. Happy baking!